together. What is the biggest difference between you and your opponent, and why would you be more effective as LA mayor?
Well, you know, I think Los Angeles, it is very clear that we need a new direction with bold, decisive leadership. We have an emergency. 40,000 people on our streets not being addressed to me with the urgency and with the, like it is an emergency. And not a commitment to solve the problem. I am a lifelong pro-choice Democrat who is always on your side. We have to stand up for what we believe in, and I believe that in Los Angeles, we can have a city where homelessness is addressed. We can have a city where people feel safe and actually are safe, and I think we can have a city where people are not priced out of housing, but actually counted in. And so we can do this together. I have worked for many years on these issues. In 1990, started an organization called Community Coalition because the city was facing a crisis then. It was a crisis of crime. It was a crisis of poverty. I brought everyone together, and we came up with very specific solutions.
Mr. Caruso, what's the biggest difference between the two of you, and why are you most qualified?
Well, first of all, thank you for agreeing to the debate. It's good to be on the stage with you, and thank you to Fox and Univision, LA Times, and KPPC. I believe our city is in trouble, and I want to help. I think back on my grandparents who immigrated to this country, and they landed in Boyle Heights. That's where our family story started. They came here with no money, and they didn't know the language, but they had something that so many people that come to the United States share, and that's a big dream. LA was always the place where big dreams come true. I think now when I go around the city, and I am loving being a candidate, by the way, because I get to meet so many people. Crime is dampening dreams. It continues to rise. Homelessness, the count continues to rise. People are scared. People are worried. They're also heartbroken. They feel like they haven't been heard around the community. I want to change that. There's a clear choice in this election. You can either have more of the same and the system is broken, or we can have real positive change. And I'd be honored to have the support and the opportunity to do that.
You brought up the issue of being a lifelong pro-choice Democrat.
Yes.
How much does the LA mayor even have to do with abortion rights?
Well, let me just tell you, it's a question of values. It's a question of democratic values. We are a democratic city, and I think that that is one of the differences between the two of us. Los Angeles and California, I would say with pride, is welcoming people from other places to receive reproductive rights. And I think that protecting a woman's right to choose is fundamental. It is a reflection of your values. So whether or not the city of Los Angeles administers health care, it's a question of values. And that's who I am. That's who I've always been.
In the past, you have donated to candidates who were against abortion rights, like George W. Bush, Mitch McConnell. Do you regret that now?
Well, I am pro-choice. I always have been. I'm clear, I'm on the record for decades that I believe that government should not be involved in people's right of how they decide on what to do with their body. But let me just say something here. To use the same standards that are used against me, the question that you asked, Karen has supported a congressman in Georgia, anti-abortion, supported the Hyde Amendment with Obama health care that prevented federal funds to be used, supported Scientology, lays praise on Scientology. You know, if the same standard exists, then we should both be held to the same standard, not because we donated to one person or another.
All right, we'll maybe get into that later, but let's get to the biggest issue that people asked about, which was homelessness. Erica.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so biggest issue to no one's surprise is homelessness, but I wanted to get a sense of what each of your plans are and why it's better than your opponent. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Caruso. What is your plan?
My plan is clearly to call a state of emergency, take the authority in the mayor's office, bring a team of the best and the brightest. I want to be a part of a team of change agents that are actually going to get something done. We have studied what has worked across the country and across the world. Immediately start building shelter beds. 30,000 is part of the plan. 500 caseworkers, 500 sanitation workers to clean up the street. We've got to meet people where they are. What's happened so far by our elected officials is inhumane. We have people living and dying on the street. The population continues to grow. It's sad. Meet them where they are. Do them with dignity. But the premise of my plan is get them in shelter, keep them safe, and then offer the services that they need. Psychiatric care, drug addiction care, retraining to get out there. Rand did a study, 80% of the people on the street want to get off the street. And when you go down to the care providers that I've walked with, People's Concern, the Downtown Women's Center, the rate of success is enormous. I want to expand that.
Thank you. Congresswoman.
Well, we absolutely have to get people off the street immediately. We have to get them into housing, and we have to address why they were unhoused to begin with. Lately, people have viewed the unhoused as a monolith, people who are strung out on meth and don't want to come inside. There's actually several different categories of people who are unhoused. For example, there's thousands of children that are unhoused. There's children who aged out of the foster care system. You would have to provide housing for them differently. There's veterans. There's people who are suffering from serious illnesses. So we have to get people off the street right away, but shelters are not the answer. And what we have done too long is we have put people in shelters. Now the shelters have become so dangerous that people don't even want to be in the shelters and are choosing to be outside on the street. So we have to have interim housing, but it has to be very limited in time, and we have to move people into permanent supportive housing. On day one, housing, day one, services.
Mr. Caruso, what do you think of that?
Well, I just want to respond. I mean, the Congresswoman's plan is clear. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, she said, I cannot solve this problem in 4 years. The best I can do is provide some light at the end of the tunnel. We have 5 people a day in Skid Row alone dying. The population is growing. People are living in their own waste. And with all due respect, we did a white paper on this. Everything that is working works when you get people off the street, give them dignity and humanity, welcome them where they are. God bless you. And then provide the services. That's how it works. If you give the services on the street, I know I'm going a little over time, you just create the circle that we have, and the problem continues to get worse.
Thank you. Congresswoman.
My problem with Rick's plan is his Rick plan just calls for shelters. You have to have shelters, but you have to move people into permanent supportive housing, and then you have to mainstream them out of that. Now, there's some people that might have chronic illnesses, and such as mental health, and might have to be in supportive housing maybe for the rest of their lives. But the point is that you have to have a comprehensive approach. The other thing you have to do is prevent people from falling into homelessness. We were able to do that, preventing people from falling into homelessness with a lot of money that we were able to win from the federal government for COVID relief. We'll talk more about that later, I'm sure.
Gabriella, to you.
Yeah, expanding precisely on that topic. You know, Latinos are becoming unhoused disproportionately at an alarming rate. When you see an overall increase of people going out in the streets and living there, it's 4%, according to the latest count. But among Latinos, it's 26%. What are you going to do to address that? And we're going to start with you, Ms. Bass.
You know, I'm really concerned about that, and I'm thinking that one of the reasons for that problem is a holdover from the Trump administration, where a lot of people, especially from mixed status families, might be concerned that they can't take advantage of any public resources, because if they do, then they might never be eligible to become citizenship. So I think that we look at why so many Latinos are falling into homelessness, and again, we have to address that reason. We have to get them off the street. So I would look at immigration to see if that is a contributing factor, and then look at also the fact that there are a lot of Latino families, because housing is so expensive, the city has become so unaffordable that you have multiple families living in one house. And so I think that there's a lot of different forms of homelessness. Some people are inside, some people are outside. We have to bring people inside right away.
Mr. Caruso.
Well, the Latino population, as you said, the numbers I saw are 27%. It overly skews against the Latinos. I think a big part of it is a remnant of COVID. COVID overly impacted the Latino community. I've been spending a lot of time around this city in the Latino communities, which I have loved to do, but they feel unheard. They feel like they're not listened to. They feel like they've been abandoned, yet they're 50% of the population of the city. Crime has overly impacted them. They've lost businesses. So that's what's driving a lot of this. They can't afford to pay the rent. Affordability in the city is terrible. We have to do a better job. So I agree that we have to do some things to find the root causes, but we have to lean in. And my plan doesn't just talk about building shelters. My plan talks about building shelters, having wraparound services, engaging them constantly, and at the same time, building housing. If you go to the Downtown Women's Center, They've got the services that are working. They've waited 6 years to get a building permit to build more apartments. Shame on our elected officials.
We're going to go on that a little bit later on, but I wanted to address this. You said 80% of the people who get who's offered a place to go to and leave the streets will take it. However, Ms. Bass, you say children, immigration.
Right.
Who is asking for immigration papers when they need a shelter?
No, exactly right. The point I was raising is that I think that might be one of the causes for people being afraid to come inside, because they might feel that they're taking use of public services that then would compromise their citizenship. So when you would do outreach in the Latino community amongst Latino homelessness, you would make sure that people, number one, were bilingual, but people also had sensitivity to immigration as a key issue that might be keeping people outside, afraid to go in a shelter, and then find out that that's held against them in the future.
Something doesn't add up, because if you have 80% of people accepting a shelter and then saying because of immigration they wouldn't go, what am I missing here?
I'm just citing the RAND study. So I believe in the research that they did. They may be off 5%, 10%. It's still the majority. Again, we're talking to the care providers down there, like the Downtown Women's Center. We have 13,000 women living on the street every night, trying to go to bed and protect themselves, and they can't. The majority get abused on the streets. What we've allowed to happen is insane. It's inhumane. And I'm sorry, it has grown the population 80% during Karen Bass's term representing the city of Los Angeles. We've got to have a different direction. There's a clear choice in how we move forward here.
Thank you, Mr. Caruso.
We are partnering with Loyola Marymount University on this debate, and we're grateful to have another one of their students. Stefanos Sideris is a senior at LMU. Now it's time for his question.
As my peers and I at LMU think about life after graduation, we worry whether we can afford to live in LA. What is your plan to, excuse me, sorry.
To keep new graduates from leaving to find more affordable housing.
This is not easy, having lights on you, a TV camera, and these three stare at you. So
Yeah,
I feel it.
it is our fault.
I feel your pain.
We understand your
Mr.
question.
Caruso, the question is really about keeping new graduates from leaving. He's concerned about leaving town.
I want to talk to you because I do understand what you're saying, and I do worry about it. I'm a builder. I know how to build. We have overregulated building in this city to the point that it's so expensive to build in the city, people aren't building. That's why affordability is so upside down. People like yourself, you work hard, you go to school, you get a decent job, and you can't afford an apartment or to buy here. We have to strip away the unnecessary regulation. I know how to do that. I deal with it every day. And then we got to start building and incentivize people to build at affordable rates, and have the city lean in with its full faith and credit to guarantee loans, to reduce the cost, so they can pass on those savings to you. The future of the city is you and people like you. And we need to make sure that you're able to buy a place, work here, invest here, build a business, grow the economy of Los Angeles. Greatest city in the world. But it can only grow if we allow the youth to invest in this city.
Congresswoman, are there regulations you think that need to be cut right now to make building easier?
Oh, absolutely there are, but before I get to that, let me just say that the first thing that you need after school is a job. And so we have to make sure that there are decent paying jobs that will allow you to afford a place. And then we have to reduce rents, and the way we deal with affordability is to increase the supply. But yes, I think there are regulations that need to change, but I also think the process needs to change. So one of the things that I would do immediately for anybody that wants to come and build housing specifically for the homeless population or affordable housing, I would say, one, you don't need to go to the front of the line. We need to have a completely separate line for you. We need to centralize the process with all of the various departments so that you don't have to run around to 10 and 15 places. That will allow people to build quicker, and if you can build faster, it's cheaper.
Mr. Caruso, let's dig in on how you cut those regulations. What happens if environmentalists protest that, if the city council says no, if state regulators say no? How do you actually make that happen?
You can have laws, and that's a really good question. We have a law in the state of California that provides if you meet certain goals on sustainability and you check the boxes, you're exempt from the CEQA challenges on it, and we should be doing that for sustainable housing. We should be doing it for low-income housing. We should be doing it for housing for the homeless. We should have a fast track. Years ago when I started building in this city, there was a fast track method to get permits. We don't have that anymore. So there's a whole bunch of ways of doing it. But listen, I want a separate team of people in my office who understand how to build, that's going to cut through all the red tape, and we got to start housing people.
And last word on this topic to you, 30 seconds.
Well, let me just say we absolutely need to do whatever we can to cut regulations. And let me give you an example of something that is really not allowed people to get into housing with vouchers, for example. There's so many requirements. The federal government, one of the things that we did with COVID money is we sent a lot of vouchers to Los Angeles. Los Angeles has over 3,000 vouchers, but has only been able to use about 190. And so we need to waive those regulations that you have to have an ID, for example. Those regulations need to be waived so that we can take advantage of the vouchers that the city has.
All right, we're going to continue on the theme of housing and housing affordability. Frank Stoltz from KPCC has our next question.
And I'm going to use notes.
Smart, Frank.
Yeah, I'm older. I want to ask both of you about the city's eviction moratorium. It's set to expire within a month of one of you taking office and could force thousands of people from their homes. Do you support extending the moratorium? And if not, what other protections would you provide renters if it ends? Provide renters if it ends. Congresswoman Bass, would you answer first?
First of all, we cannot allow more people to become homeless by the moratorium going away. But at the same time, we also need to help the landlords, especially the mom and pop landlords, and that's the majority of the landlords. There's other reasons why homelessness might increase in the near future is because a lot of the resources that we fought for and won for COVID that came to the city of Los Angeles are about to expire. So all of those people that are in hotels and motels from Project Room Key and Project Home Key, those resources are about to expire. We need to get them extended. But the eviction moratorium, we can't just have that go away and then have thousands of people on our street. That would be a disaster.
So you would extend it?
Yes, I would extend it.
And do you?
We would extend it, but the landlords need to be assisted as well.
All right.
We don't need for them to default on their mortgages, and then you have two people without housing.
Would you extend it, Mr. Caruso?
Well, to be very honest, I don't understand what that plan was. There was a lot of nice talk. You have to really drill down into the nuance of what's going on. Somebody can stay in an apartment and not pay rent without showing proof that they need to stay there. We need to change the process. Every landlord that I talk to, including me, I am more than happy to support somebody to stay at a reduced or no rent until they can get back on their feet, as long as you prove that you can do that. There's no system in the Los Angeles housing department to prove it. So the unfairness that landlords are feeling, everybody realizes we have shared responsibility, is to just make sure that there's proof and it's verified. And then we should extend it. If somebody is making money and can afford the rent, they shouldn't be carried, right? So it's a matter of fairness. So I would change the law in dealing with the problem, and we have to understand the problem. It's one of the advantages I have. I understand business. I built a business. So I know how to solve the problems that businesses and human beings are dealing with.
Thank you.
Congresswoman Bass, he says the eviction moratorium as it works now is not fair.
Well,
is impractical.
I don't make the assumption that people who need the eviction moratorium for protection are cheating. There are always people who abuse the system, but I don't believe that that is the general rule. And I also think that renters need to have legal assistance as well to protect them, because there are landlords that want to evict so that they can sell their property, so that they can raise rents, because some of the apartments are rent controlled. And so I don't make the assumption that somebody is there to cheat. I do make the assumption that people are in housing because they need to be housed.
So, Mr. Caruso, are you promising to change the eviction moratorium and then extend it?
I'm promising to make sure it's fair to those that are living there and need the help so they don't end up on the street, and also to support the landlords so that there's fairness to the landlords that made the investment and bought that apartment building or whatever it may be. Yes, and then extend it.
Sounds like a
But not extend it the way it is today. It's not fair to anybody. So we can make it right. That's the role of the mayor, is to represent everybody and find common ground and do what's right for everybody. At least that's what's going to drive me.
Sounds like a bit of a policy distinction there. Now let's talk about the issue of public safety. Our last debate was in March. Congresswoman Bass, I'm sure you remember this question. I asked you on a scale of 1 to 10.
I sure do.
With 1 being not safe, 10 being really safe. How safe did you feel? And you said you felt a 10 at the time.
I said
and then your guns were stolen from your house, and you said that your safety had been shattered. So I'm curious what that number would be now that you've been through that, and more importantly, in addition to that, how are you going to make all of us feel more safe?
Well, let me answer that first. My public safety plan calls for getting officers on the street immediately in neighborhoods and areas that want to have an increased police presence. And the best way and the quickest way to do that is to move officers away from administrative duty. Now, we also need to hire officers. We need to bring LAPD up to its authorized budgeted amount, which is about 9,700, which means in any given month, we might need to hire from 200 to 400 officers. At the same time, I believe in stopping crime today, but preventing crime tomorrow, and investing heavily in crime prevention strategies, of which I pioneered a number when I started Community Coalition in 1990. They've been replicated and refined, and so that's how I would keep Los Angeles safe. In terms of myself, I was making reference to my neighborhood where I felt safe because of measures I personally took and also measures that were taken by my neighborhood. Obviously, they failed. So my sense of safety was shattered. If I had to grade it, I would grade it at a 5.
You'd grade it a 5. Last time around, you didn't grade it at all. Somehow you didn't. You got out of that answering that. So I'm not going to be as kind this time. How would you grade your own personal safety, with 1 being not very safe, 10 being very safe? And why is your plan better when it comes to public safety?
Well, and I may not answer that again. So, because what I said last time is, I'm going around this whole city. People don't feel safe. They just don't feel safe. They don't feel safe to go for a walk. People are taking off their jewelry before they go to dinner. Think about all the things that we can't do anymore. You don't feel safe. And let's talk about the real numbers. And we didn't hear much about these guns, which I think the Congresswoman should answer some questions about. What kind of guns were they? How were they stored? Was it in compliance with city law? The city has a very, very detailed law. We are 880 officers down. 880. In 2019, our leadership defunded the police. Our last academy class, it's normally 150. We recruited 23. We're trying to dig our way out of a hole. We've got to change. There is a clear difference between the Congresswoman's plan and mine. My experience being a police commissioner, working with LAPD and the leadership there, I dropped crime 30% with the team there.
Yeah. So why no number?
Because it doesn't matter if you don't feel safe, whether it's a 5 or a 4 or an 8, it goes to your gut and your soul and your heart. You're worried about your kids walking to school. I don't want to put a 5 on my kid and say, well, there's a 50-50 chance you make it. I think, I mean, seriously.
So,
I mean, but Elix, we're dealing with life and death.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the highest homicide rate in 15 years. We're dealing with more people being killed by guns than in recent history. It's not a numerical number that makes somebody feel good.
He's making some big questions to you about your guns and personal safety, and also making claims about your thing. How do you want about your policy? How do you want to respond to that?
Well, actually, I'm disheartened. I'm disheartened, Rick. So I just want to take a moment and speak directly to the people of Los Angeles. My home was burglarized. I called the police, and later they arrested 2 suspects. And the storage and registration were 100% legal. I think this is an act of desperation, Rick. Calling for me, which a letter went out today by a member of the city council that I was very shocked by, calling for me to be investigated for the theft that happened at my house.
Yeah.
And Rick, the reason why I'm disappointed is because you remember when the Grove was burglarized, I called you to find out how you were. And instead, you call on me to prove one thing or another, and then the councilman calls on me to be investigated?
So that councilman was Joe Buscaino.
Who's right here?
A response from you, and then we'll move on.
What I said
Yes.
about your burglary is that I feel sorry for anybody, including you, for that to happen to. It's a terrible personal sense of evasion.
It was.
And I said that publicly. And I sympathize
After a
with
few
you.
days.
No, no. It was actually the day I found out about it. But I would also say this. There are 2 guns on the street now. And we have terrible gun violence in the city of Los Angeles. And that's a shame. And I know that pains you. But knowing how those are stored, it's a simple thing to answer.
And I want to remind both of you that bell means it's time to stop talking as well. I know there's a lot to get into there.
Excuse me. Yes, there is.
We're going to keep moving. Erica, the next question is to you.
Something just as probably contentious. Let's talk about USC. So,
Oh, boy.
yeah, exactly. Exciting. So I'm going to ask each of you a different question, and you'll have a chance to respond back with a rebuttal. But I want to start with you, Congresswoman. You received a $100,000 scholarship without having to apply. To be
That's not
clear,
true.
Okay. To be clear, prosecutors have said you are not the target of a criminal investigation.
Thank you.
In retrospect, was it bad judgment to do that, given USC the opportunity to curry political favor with you?
No, I don't think it was bad judgment at all. People that know me know that I have spent the last 3 decades working for the most vulnerable children in our country, children in the child welfare system. What people might not know is that I was on the faculty of USC Medical School for 15 years. I was offered that scholarship so that I could be a better legislator to take care of the nation's most vulnerable children. I applied for that scholarship. I studied nights and weekends. I got excellent grades. I did everything that I was supposed to do to better serve the children of the United States. I didn't apply for an MBA so that I could be a venture capitalist. It's a social work degree that was given to me on merit.
Mr. Caruso, Congresswoman Bass has accused you of covering up a sexual misconduct scandal involving former USC gynecologist. How do you respond to that?
I'll respond the way that your newspaper responded, the LA Times. When USC was in a crisis, they called on Rick Caruso. And in that article and articles over the last couple of days have said he is widely regarded, your paper, widely regarded as cleaning up USC. Let me respond to the Congresswoman. She did not apply. It was not on merit, as I understand. It's not what the federal prosecutors said. The federal prosecutors have said there was no application. She got a $95,000 scholarship. She failed to report it in Congress on the paperwork where it had to be reported. She got a degree taking less classes than her fellow students took, and then worked with the dean to fashion legislation and push through Congress to have taxpayer dollars go back to that same school, and she is named critical in a federal bribery and corruption case, reported by the LA Times using the words of the prosecutors. That's the way it is. And there's an email.
Thank you.
Congresswoman.
Okay.
Yes, a couple of things. Rick, you know you are totally misrepresenting that. As a member of as the chair of the Board of Trustees, was fully knowledgeable of the scholarship that I had. I would say the victims of the gynecologist who sexually assaulted hundreds of students at USC have asked you to release the report. As chair of the Board of Trustees, he committed to do an investigation, to do a report, and then he decided afterwards that he wasn't going to release it when the victims asked for it to be released.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to a great deflection.
All right.
Let me answer. Instead of answering the question, those are the words of the prosecutor, the federal prosecutor. So are you saying the prosecutors are lying?
No, I'm saying you are.
No, I'm reciting the words of the prosecutors.
Okay.
15 seconds.
So are you saying the prosecutors, federal prosecutors, are lying in their filing in federal court? Because they've named you critical. There's an email that says that the dean is going to give the same deal to Mark Ridley Thomas that they gave to you, and he's been indicted.
We're going to move on to another topic. Gabriella, to you.
Yeah, sure. Why don't I take you all back to the sidewalk?
Okay.
Let's all go, forget the university, let's go back to the sidewalk. And of course, pandemic pushed a lot of people to find new resources, new things to do. As you know, we're very entrepreneurial, and given the situation, many of the Latino community and other people went to the streets for street vending. So the lack of regulation has led to abuses and attacks, especially against Latinos. Both of you said you're in favor of regulations for street vending. However, the question is, where would you support street vendors being allowed to operate? Streets or areas particularly intended for that purpose? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Caruso.
I think both. It's a business. You know, one of the families that Tina and I support through Operation Progress down in South L.A., he's a street vendor. He lives in Nickerson Gardens. He was telling me that's the way he supports his family. By the way, he's got 2 kids in Northeastern. How about that? He does it off of street vending and the help of Operation Progress and other people. So you've got to give people a path to business. 90% of the businesses in Los Angeles are small businesses. Street vending is a small business. He's proud of that business. That's great. Let him build that business. Maybe that business goes from street vending into a storefront and starts hiring people and grows his business. But all of it needs to be fairly regulated, and it can be. So I don't think it's one or the other. I'm pro-business. I want to open the doors of City Hall and say, we welcome you. We will help you build your business, big or small. We're no longer going to make it so difficult you're going to move your business out of L.A. Because that's what's been happening. More people have left L.A. in the last year than have come in the first time in history.
Thank you.
Ms. Bass.
Well, one of the first things that I would do in my administration would be to have a deputy mayor for business, and that deputy mayor would work with both legacy businesses as well as small businesses. And what I would do with street vendors would be to do outreach to them, and to make sure that they are meeting the regulations, and if they're not, to help them do that, to provide technical assistance, and also to provide them a pathway to a brick and mortar business if that's what they would like to do.
You didn't answer my question, Mr. Caruso. I would like to ask you,
sorry.
because I wanted to know if you would support them to be in front of the Grove.
Yes. I said everyone.
In front of the Grove?
Yes.
On the street.
You know, we've started with small businesses that have been in a kiosk, and those businesses have grown on our property and moved into storefronts. I've actually lived it and worked it. I don't need a deputy mayor for business. I know business. You need a mayor that understands business, that changes the culture and the tone of the city. So absolutely I would.
What about you, Ms. Bass? I would like to know if you would allow them, would rather have them on the streets regulated, or would you move them to a market or another place?
Well, I would do both, but it would be what they wanted. It'll be interesting to see street vendors in front of the Grove, but anyway.
We've had it.
But anyway, I would reach out to the street vendors. I think it's really important to reach out to them. And the other thing is that I would be very concerned about their safety. I've seen some of the attacks on the news, and I think that they're really egregious. So if a street vendor is in front of my office or whatever is fine. But I do think that we should offer them assistance.
Our next question is on the issue of homelessness. We got so many different viewers asking us about homelessness. David Guerrieri is one of them. Frank has our next question.
I'm looking forward to my bacon-wrapped hot dog in front of the Grove.
You know what? Hey, Frank, I'll introduce you to the hot dog vendor that's been on one of our properties.
Your time's up. You're taking, where's the bell?
Okay.
All right. Both of you have vowed to get thousands of unhoused people off the streets by scaling up temporary and other housing. But some, of course, refuse to go, and others walk away and return to the streets. What do you do about people on the streets who refuse services and or shelter? Mr. Caruso, I know in the past you have said you want to arrest people who refuse services.
No, I never said I want to arrest people. I said at a certain point in time you can no longer allow encampments. Encampments are unfair to the community where they are, to the residential communities, business communities, parks, beaches. You can't operate a city that way. And we're unfair to the homeless, allowing them to be on the streets and dying on the street. What I said is the minute we have a bed, the minute we have shelter, nice shelters, by the way, I like building nice things. We want to build it with dignity and humanity, reach out to people, build trust, bring them in, give them the services they need. It's happening now, Frank. There's organizations that are doing God's work that's happening. If you look at people's concern, they told me 94% of those they shelter do not fall back to homelessness. I'll go with 94%. That's a hell of a success rate. So why don't we build on what's working? Because I tell you right now, what's been happening is not working. We can't allow what's going on with the elected officials to continue and watch people suffer in the streets.
You did say in the last debate that you would arrest people at a certain point. I think you're saying the same thing now. Congresswoman Bass, you've said that arresting folks would be criminalizing poverty.
Yes, that's right. I did say that, and I do believe that. I do think that when you are dealing with an encampment, when you're dealing with people who are homeless, one of the things that I want to do is massively expand street outreach. So there are street outreach teams now done by some of the organizations that Rick was referring to, and they do an excellent job, but they're never able to reach scale because they don't have the resources. And then the people that I think should be doing the outreach are people who were formerly unhoused. Sometimes there's multidisciplinary teams, but it's a way of providing jobs. So one of the things I would do, the people that are in Project Home Key, Project Room Key in the motels right now, one of the things that I would do to help them get on their feet, move into permanent supportive housing or just mainstream into regular housing is hire them, train them, have them go out and do outreach, especially for those people that are service resistant. Because at Community Coalition, when I started Community Coalition and we were trying to deal with the problem of crack cocaine and we were trying to get people off crack, we used people who had been formerly addicted.
Thank you.
People in recovery. Sorry.
So the question, I guess, suppose, Mr. Caruso, is maybe respond to that. And do you see a difference in sort of the threshold at which the two of you would go ahead and arrest someone?
Well, there's a massive difference between the two of us because my plan has 30,000 beds the first year. My plan has 500 caseworkers, so we have the right services on the street for their mental health, for the drug addicted, that we're engaging them. But every study will tell you that you will not be successful if the service is only on the street. You have to get them in, welcome them, bring them home, make them feel safe, and then they start having the services. That's what I want to do. So yes, at a certain point in time, you're going to have to move encampments off the streets because our neighborhoods are so heavily impacted, and you'll never be able to get crime under control unless you deal with homelessness. I didn't hear it.
Congresswoman Bass.
Thank you. Sorry.
You want to respond to that?
Yes. As I understand your plan, it calls for 30,000 people off the street and primarily in shelters. It's not real clear how much it costs. I believe close to $1 billion, because I think you were just talking about the cost of the housing, not necessarily the services. My plan would cost about $290 million. I do think that we can do more with existing resources. I gave before the example of vouchers. We need to extend the Project Room Key, Project Home Key. But at the end of the day, you can't criminalize poverty.
Thank you.
You would have them in jail. They'd be there 3 days. They'd be right back out on the street.
Thank you.
Can I respond just to clear something up? I'm sorry, Alex.
A few seconds.
Okay. The cost of providing a service on the street is 3 times the cost of providing a service when somebody is sheltered. We could treat 3 times the amount of people if we have them in shelters than we keep them on the street. 35,000 versus 10,000.
I don't think you provide services on the street.
You are, real quickly, because I gave them a few extra time.
You provide services when they're housed. So you house them on day one, you provide services on day one.
We're providing
no services
on the street now.
Okay,
It's happening now.
you are watching Debate Night in Los Angeles. This is the first TV debate between Rick Caruso and Karen Bass. Erica D. Smith of the LA Times has our next question.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about political affiliation. So, Mr. Caruso, I'm going to ask you both 2 separate questions. Mr. Caruso, you became a Democrat shortly before registering to run for mayor. Previously, you were an independent, and before that, a Republican. Why should voters trust that you're truly a Democrat now and share Democratic values?
They should look at my track record of what I've done. I left the Republican Party a long time ago, and I did it for a good reason, because it didn't reflect my values. And I'll give you a good example which doesn't reflect my values. We have Republican governors that are shipping people to different parts of this country, to different cities. They're being used as props. That's wrong. It's disgusting. I don't agree with that. I don't want to be a part of that party. that doesn't reflect my values. I have always supported the hardworking men and women of Los Angeles. I believe in the democratic values. I have always been socially liberal. I've been on the record for that, and that's where my heart lives. I supported Jerry Brown early on and a good friend, Governor Newsom early on and a good friend. The list goes on and on of Democrats that I'm close with. So I'm proud of it. Simple as that.
And you're referencing, of course, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida and others who are flying migrants to
It's terrible.
sanctuary
These are
cities
human
in other
beings.
states.
Yes.
Congresswoman, you are a lifelong Democrat, as you mentioned earlier. L.A., also, as you mentioned earlier, is a very Democratic city. But, you know, there are critics who will say you'll just be more of the same and that we have a number of failed Democratic policies. What do you say to those folks?
Well, first of all, Rick, I think when you changed your registration, one of the things that you said is that you liked the Democratic Party of 10 years ago, not the Democratic Party of today. I like the Democratic Party 10 years ago, and I like the Democratic Party of today, because the Democratic Party of today is more diverse politically and diverse in every single way.
Doesn't seem to be accepting me.
Well, but you know, and you know, no, that's not funny. He's correct. No, he is correct, and that's because for 36 years he was a Republican, then he became an independent, then he became a Republican again to support John Kasich, while John Kasich was signing anti-choice legislation. Then he became an independent, and then 3 weeks before filing, he became a Democrat. That's the problem, is that you can't just keep going back and forth like that.
Do you want to respond, Mr. Caruso?
I do. I'm glad you brought up John Kasich. I supported John Kasich because I was trying to stop Donald Trump. If you remember at that time, John Kasich was the only chance of messing up the electoral votes for Trump to get the nomination. So I supported Kasich to use him as a foil to stop Donald Trump. I was on the record for that. And I have been against Donald Trump because you wrongly accused me of being like Trump, which is so unfair. Never supported Trump, never gave him a dime, never supported him for president. And when you asked me for donations, I supported you and gave you donations. Did you think I was Donald Trump when I was writing you a check? Of course not.
I do want to circle back, Congresswoman, to the question I originally asked, which is why are you not more of the same?
Why am I not more of the same?
Democratic, I mean,
Well, you know what? I don't accept the notion that the reason why we have problems is because it's Democrats that run the cities. That's a Republican talking point. You know, and Rick, I don't think that you are Donald Trump. I don't. But
Thank
you did accept an appointment from him.
I want to make sure we see that in the news and advertising. Thank you.
But you did accept an appointment. You know, I mean, as someone who suffered for 4 years under this man, the idea of accepting an appointment from him is very tough.
So then, to his point, why did you accept money from him?
Why did I accept money from him? Because you know what? In fundraising, you raise money from a lot of folks. He also gave me money for foster care. So there are actually other Republicans that donate to me, by the way.
Yeah.
Other Republicans who've endorsed me.
Gabriella, the next question is to you.
Well, can I?
You want me to tell you?
What's that?
You want me to tell you who? I'm going to tell you who endorsed me, Republican? Mike Valines. We were leaders together in Sacramento.
We're going to keep moving.
No?
No comic relief?
Okay, no comment back. Okay, let's move on to this question. The city of LA, as you know, has the most stringent environmental rules for building in the country. Allegedly, builders say that they drive up the cost and drag out construction, making it impossible to deal with. As mayor, would you move to lessen those environmental regulations to make building more affordable housing included, or would those environmental goals be more important to you as mayor? And we're going to start with you, Congresswoman Bass.
Well, the environmental goals are extremely important to me, and I'm honored to have the endorsement of the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters. We have to get building done. Environmental rules are put there for our safety and protection, but sometimes the rules can be so onerous that are not necessarily protecting the environment, but we need to expedite building. And one of the issues that we're dealing with a lot right now is climate change. We have wonderful goals in Los Angeles on climate change. We're all experiencing the heat. We have fires. We need to increase the fire department. That's another issue in terms of public safety, but also the environment, because one of the reasons why we are dealing with the fires is because of climate change. So environmental rules are there for protection, but sometimes the rules can prohibit us from being able to build, and there might need to be flexibility there. I would not eliminate them.
But you would favor, yeah, absolutely. So you would favor environmental rules, or would you favor lowering the cost of building by removing some of those rules?
Well, you know, it just depends. It just depends. I don't think that I could blanketly say. I do think that rules need to be relaxed in a lot of different areas because we have a crisis. The only way the city is going to be affordable is if more housing is built.
Mr. Caruso.
Do I get the start of the clock?
Yeah, 1 minute. There you go.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Hey, as I understand your question, these are environmental laws that affect the construction of a building, correct? I have built, with my team, I have an incredible team that have built a lot of great buildings in Los Angeles. The requirements on being regulations to protect the environment, they drive costs, but they're worth the cost. I have never found those to be the problem that's driving cost. And in fact, we've exceeded that. Every project we built, I believe, including the last one of the Palisades, has a gold LEED certification, which means it's of the best in terms of environmental rules. I think we should do more on the environmental rules on how we build projects to make sure they're safe for the environment. What's driving the cost is overregulation. What's driving the cost is you can have 10 different committees have to approve a project in the city of Los Angeles. And do you know that our planning codes in the city of Los Angeles, 74% are over 20 years old?
Thank you.
They don't even relate to the city. That's what
you.
drives the cost.
Ms. Bass, do you have anything to say about that? Those rules that actually prohibit affordable housing to be built constantly, including those environmental rules?
Well, I would agree, and that's why I said that if you're going to build affordable housing or housing to house the homeless, you should have your whole separate line. It should be expedited, and all of the departments that you would interact with should be centralized so that you don't have to run around to 10 or 20 places. And so there are rules and regulations that do need to be relaxed. Everybody says that. I talk to developers who tell me that they can go to Downey and get something built in no time. But when it comes to building in Los Angeles, it's extremely onerous.
Last word to you, Mr. Caruso.
Well, listen, I agree, but I would also say that I understand how this works. I've been on the inside of city government. I worked for 3 mayors. I started with Tom Bradley and then Dick Reardon and then Jim Hahn. I also understand how government fails. And this is an area where government's failing because, quite frankly, I think the culture has been with our leadership that we're not there to serve the people. And if you're there to serve the people, you'll figure out how to move projects along and get them built. Right, and celebrate this incredible city that we have and allow it to grow. That would be my culture change.
Our next question is about the issue of corruption. As we know, there have been several members of the LA City Council in recent years who have ended up behind bars. We have a question from one of our students from Loyola Marymount University, a sophomore named Chloe Barsonis. Chloe.
In a recent LMU survey, only half of residents and those aged 18 to 29 felt that they could trust city government to do what is right. How will you go about instilling confidence in Angelenos so that they can trust your administration?
Mr. Caruso, you go first.
It's a great question. The system is broken, and that's why we have the problems we have today. And the system, quite frankly, is corrupt. And with all due respect to my opponent, she's part of that system. It's just not working. That's why we have Metro that's filthy. Elevators don't work. Escalators don't work. We have crime rising. We have homelessness. The new count just up another 4% in the city of Los Angeles. I'm outside the system. I've served the city of LA under 3 mayors, like I said, since I was 26 years old, for 40 years. Not one ethical violation. How about that? That's what I'm going to bring to City Hall. Zero tolerance. I have a corruption plan. My opponent does not have a corruption plan. I'm going to have a czar that's powered to make sure there is no corruption. Should be zero tolerance. I dealt with it at USC. I changed the culture. I changed the leadership. I worked with my board. We all brought in new leaders, and we changed it. We have to do that in City Hall. but we'll never clean it up, this city.
Congresswoman, to you, and that's quite something what he's saying, that you're part of basically a culture of corruption.
Well, we'll talk about his involvement in that in a minute, but let me just say that he stole my plan. We will have ethics czar. As a matter of fact, Norm Eisen, who was Obama's ethics czar, has agreed that if I have the privilege of being the mayor of Los Angeles, that he will come. Obama administration had no investigations for 8 years. Norm Eisen said that he would come to Los Angeles, he would do a top-to-bottom review of all city policies. I will ask any nominee of mine to sign an ethics pledge, and we will make sure that we have a very clean administration. But having said that, though, I think it's really important and incumbent on anybody that's in elected office. You have to do the outreach and communicate constantly with people so that they understand exactly what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. So transparency and civic involvement is going to be key to my administration.
She says you stole her plan. What do you say?
How did I steal something that isn't out there? I don't know. I've never seen the plan. My plan's out there. It's been out there for a long time. But listen, leadership, it starts with setting the tone. A good friend of mine has always said, more is caught than taught. A leader has to set an example. I'm going to do things right. I'm going to make sure that my example sets the tone. We will not allow corruption. We're not going to have lobbyists. I'm not taking money from lobbyists. I'm not taking money from special interests. I don't have a PAC in Washington giving me money, right? All of those things lead to corruption because you owe people back things.
Thank you.
Well, he doesn't need to take money from PACs because he's already spent $53 million on this race so far. $40 million in the primary, and actually, no, it's 60, and $20 million in the last couple of weeks to my 4. So I think that that's a different way of going about democracy and is an example of a structural problem within our democracy.
But does that potentially give him more independence?
No, I don't think it does at all. And I think that in all of his years of being a developer, and if you look at the corruption in City Hall, it's always been around developers.
Yeah.
Name one time I've been named.
And he's never built a single unit of affordable housing.
Karen, name one time that I have been named in any scandal at all in my career, in my life. Thank you.
Okay, so well, now let's have a little bit of fun, I guess, as we go towards the end. These are quick bites. First thing that comes to mind. What is one word to describe the state of Los Angeles right now?
In a crisis.
One word to describe the state of Los Angeles right now.
Yeah, I would go with crisis. I think it's beyond crisis. I just can't think of the word beyond crisis. We're at an inflection point.
Can you see a role for your opponent in your administration if you win?
Well, let's get to the point of winning, and then, we'll figure that out.
Can you see a role for your opponent?
I'm not looking for a job from you. Yes.
We just had the sheriff's debate. Who do you like for sheriff?
Luna.
Who do you like for sheriff?
I'm not getting in the middle of that. I'm trying to become the mayor of Los Angeles. I'll tell you this, though. I'll work with either one of them because that's the job of the mayor.
All right, now to our personal issues, the fun questions. Favorite place to take a visitor in L.A.?
The beach.
Favorite place to take a visitor in L.A.?
Go with Karen to the beach. I like the beach.
He's going to come with me to the beach.
I like the beach.
I said to go to Karen with the beach. I like the beach.
I want to see what that looks like.
We'd have a great time on the beach.
Exactly.
We could bring our podiums.
And lastly, I'll ask the question. Are the Dodgers going to win the World Series?
Heck yes.
Are the Dodgers going to win the World Series?
Absolutely.
So we found something we agree on.
There you
We're
go.
all going to the beach after
That's
this.
right.
Congresswoman, Mr. Caruso, thank you both so much. Thank you to our great audience. Thank you to all of our partners. We really appreciate it. We show we can have a discussion in Los Angeles. And everybody, go out and vote. Have a great night. Thanks for watching.
Good Day LA on Fox 11, the ones to watch.